Welcome to episode number 5 of the Vet Show, part of the Coach Robb Podcast Network. Coach Robb, good morning, sir. How are we?
I am doing great, man. As always, it's awesome to see you. You and I were talking off the record here. Is this the Ryan Dungey show, the Mike LaRocco show? If we're going number 5, who we go with here? Out of respect for the vets. Out of respect for the vets. Dungey's retired. LaRocco's retired.
Wasn't Ricky Johnson number 5 back in the day too at one time?
Yep. There you go. Good old RJ.
I'd have to say RJ just because he was my childhood hero growing up. I remember my dad would always take us, because we have Hangtown here, right?
Yep.
And we actually were just talking about this the other day. Remember back in the day when the old box van days, and they would line up at the hotels outside, the national tracks, where they stayed. And that's where you went to go get all the autographs and stuff. And those are just awesome memories. Me and my dad just go and see, RJ and Jeff Ward and Stanton and Bradshaw. Dude, those were just great memories.
Well, and you think about how we as young athletes, we were just like, what a dream to be able to have your own box van with your own mechanic. Can you imagine today's riders sitting in the back of a box van, no AC. It was just a little bit of shade and a oscillating fan. They've got their leathers pulled halfway down their thighs. That was living large and, big factory contracts. The thing that I think is so interesting is a box truck worth, let's just say $50,000 back in the early 80s with $250,000 Works David Bailey RC 500 out the back of it.
Yeah.
Think about the irony of that, right? You've got this relatively piece of shit box van driving down the road. Half the time they're breaking down with this exotic bikes in the back, O'Mara's bikes and like you say, RJ's bikes, and think about Lachine's bikes and all these you look up to. And I do miss because I live so close to Daytona. I'm only about 30 minutes south of Daytona. And it's interesting because I remember you go by the parking lots and all the box fans would be there and they'd all be working in the parking lot. They throw out some easy ups, if that, and they're out there working. And now rolling out of an 18-wheeler with sliding doors and AC and lounges and Dartfish software to be able to look at it. We've come a long way, baby. We've come a long way. So
it's funny.
I agree.
If you think about it, we had a ride day Saturday, a vet ride day, and we all have Sprinter vans, right? And toolboxes and shit. We're fancier than the factory guys were back in the day, and we're just vet guys.
I think back to the old Protrax trailers, and I'd see somebody with one of those, and I was like, "Man, you are living large." They had the rapist pedophile van pulling the Protrax trailer, and I was like, "Man, you can sleep in your van, and you got a dual axle enclosed trailer. Like you can hang your jerseys and your pants up inside, and you don't have to unload your toolbox." The novelty of that, I just to this day, even with my boys, as they were growing up, we used to design trailers. Where would we put the toolbox? And do you do a cone nose or do a V nose trailer? And if it's a V nose, do you put the toolbox there, or do you just make that storage? And think about it, boy,
so wild. How many guys would survive? How many factory guys right now would survive in a box van, you think, Coach? Is it
0?
That's what I'm saying.
0.
Very, very few, if any, right?
No, 0. Unless you could bring back Jimmy Dakotas and some of those authentic, you need the John Dowds and the Jimmy Dakotases of the world, the Magoo Chandlers, you need those kind of badass guys that are just salt of the earth, almost, I'll call them salty. They're just like, I just want to ride my dirt bike. That's all they cared about.
There's some good podcasts out there. I'm sure you've heard them, but some of the stories, some of the box van stories and stuff are just, some of the ones with McGrath are just mind blowing. It's not appropriate for this show, but man, awesome stories.
No, I always say to Michaela, if let's just say you had one of those box vans, if this box van could talk, what stories would it tell?
Oh, man.
What has it seen? What has it endured?
Some wild ones.
Yes. I mean, from, dirty, let's call it naughty, in layman's terms, to survival, things breaking down. We've got 11 hours to get someplace that we need 13 to drive. And how do you problem solve? And that's the stories that the naughty stuff is funny because I remember McGrath talking about, going out to his mailbox and there's panties and notes and phone numbers in the mailbox. But, the idea, the true journeyman of those guys, you think back to how tight Bob Hanna was with McCarthy. I mean, those were two men that they were grinding. They're putting in the miles, they're training during the week, they're the trials and the tribulations, the problem solving. I think that's one of the biggest things, and not to get onto a political soapbox with today's snowflakes, but no problem solving skills, no resiliency, no, okay, what's the mother of invention? Necessity. Shit, we've got a 13-hour drive. The box fan's broken down twice. We've only got 11 hours. What are we going to do?
Yeah.
And you start calling, what adjustments do you make? Hey, we're going to be late for registration, but want to let you know. Most of these kids can't even get out of the rain.
No.
Right?
Yeah. No, they didn't have Google and YouTube back then.
No, seriously, think about that, right? Think about the card catalog. I'm not that old. I'm 56 years old. For some, I'm a geezer, but for myself, I'm like, that wasn't, it seems like just yesterday. You say card catalog to today's kids, they go, huh? What's a card catalog? What's a library for some of them?
Yeah.
The idea that we could say, go look something up. I mean, remember when your parents splurged and bought you the group of encyclopedias? And everybody's report on the tiger was almost identical because everybody's reading from the same one book that you borrowed either from your friend down the street or that you had in your small library at the house. Remember when there was men and women that went, mainly men, not to sound sexist, going door to door selling the encyclopedias?
Yeah.
Michaela and I were talking about this the other day. Remember when the phone book used to be like 3 inches thick and there was 3 of them? Because you could only do A through F in the first one, right? And then who got the full page ad? And there were people that were making money selling the yellow book, the yellow page ads. Oh, you're not in the yellows, you're only in the white. Where did that go? Right?
Yep, I know.
The funny thing is, I can still remember my elementary phone number, 869-4302. I remember it to this day, but I can't tell you either of my son's or my daughter's phone numbers. If it's not saved in my phone, right? That's from 1978, 79.
I know.
Remember that phone number, but I can't.
It's crazy.
I don't want to sound like, the world's changed, but I would much rather deal with like what McCarthy and Bob Hanna had to do, where they just trying to find tracks to ride, problem solving, sweating their gonads off, working in the back of the truck. But isn't it amazing when you think about perspective? Those guys were living, that was the pinnacle we all wanted. Have your box fan and a driver and a mechanic. Think about that. The mechanic was the driver was the mechanic.
Yeah.
The rider was the trainer was the rider. They both were each other's chefs, each other's man bitches. Hey, go get me a big gulp. Hey, go get me a Slurpee. Hey, remember Wrangler drink? Get me some Wrangler.
Oh yeah.
No.
All the best
of that show, man.
Right? Yeah, there is. So this is a blast from the past for all of our listeners today.
Well, in I don't want to be that kind of guy that refuses to let history reside where it was, but I do believe that a lot of what we all endured should be pulled into the present. In counseling, they say, don't pull the past into the present and screw up the future. I think, and with the nature of this show, let's bring the past into the present and let's make the future better, right? Let's get some kids that know how to problem solve. Let's get some kids that respect that riding and racing is not a privilege. It's, it's not an entitlement. It is truly a legitimate privilege.
Yeah.
Like you were saying, we're at a point in our careers where we can afford the Sprinter van, but we're still living vicariously through that box van that we didn't have.
Yep.
I went to the track in a 79 Thunderbird T-Bird with a 3-rail trailer. And when we got the box, the toolbox on the front of it, I thought I'd died and gone to Winter Park.
Oh, yeah.
We have a 3-rail trailer. And I remember when my dad put the wood panels in between the railings so you could actually stand up there and strap your bike down.
Yeah.
Dude, we are flying high.
That was luxury back then.
Oh, I to this day, I'd never.
God forbid you have the gas can rack also on the trailer.
Yes. And I remember looking in the back of Motocross Action, and there was a company that was selling the covers for the dirt bikes when you put them on the trailer, so it kept all the debris and crap off of them. I thought, man, that is the coolest. Had Yamaha, Suzuki, Cowie down the side, and you think of the old Team Green with the thumbs up. You think about all the things that we used to want to purchase and buy. I was talking to Pat Madden, who's with a Precision Transport. He's one of our corporate partners with our elite team. And we were talking about the whole idea of when you look at the things that you always wanted, but you could never afford. My favorite, and I'm going to kind of show my immaturity maybe. Remember when you would get the DG Yamaha 2-page spread in Motocross Action?
Yeah.
I literally put it in a wooden frame on my wall. I was so in love with that. The golden swing arm, the golden radial head, the DG. Remember the tank covers were blue, and they had that really cool. I think it was on. They put it to the. It would like a road bike. They would put it underneath the rear swing arm and lift the rear wheel up, and they had the kind that you'd hang on the bars and you'd pull it back so the bike literally was suspended.
Yep.
I would sit and look at that more than Playboy. I would just look at that. I'm just like, and now that I think about it as a grown adult, it was all bling, right? It was just a radial head. Yeah, it might have dissipated a little bit of heat. The swing arm was probably not much better than stock. It was just gold and anodized and looked badass. You had a DG pipe. I would assume the pipe had some performance benefits. It was just stickers for the tank, right? But you looked at that like Moto Porn 101. You're just, I've got to have that.
That's when you're looking through a Works Connection catalog now with all the bling, you know, it's like, oh man, I got to have all those fancy caps. And
I remember having a conversation with my dad in 1978. You could buy an RM80 because that was my first bike. I've said it publicly here. And the YZ was the same thing. It was $799. And I remember the DG bike was $19.99. And I remember talking to my dad, what can I do? What jobs can I do? Because that was when you could call DG and they would just sell you the whole bike. And I was like, man, I'm trying to get knee-high Coke bottles, you know, for 10 cents. I'm like, well, there's 10 to $1, dollar into 19. Oh, that's a shitload of bottles. And I don't have enough hours in the day. I'd have to rob a grocery store to get enough bottles to go down to 7-Eleven to convert it to, you know, that was when you would go and you get a knee-high bottle on the side of the road and you get a couple pieces of gum. And, you know, if you got enough, you get a quarter to play in the pinball machine that they use at 7-Eleven, or you buy a cycle trader for $1. That was another Moto Porn book for me.
Oh, yeah.
I remember get it because it come out every Friday. I would collect bottles all week long, going up and down busy highways. I think about the highways we walked beside trying to find bottles for 10 cents. I'm surprised well, of course, nowadays, right, our parents used to say, get outside, don't come home until the lights come on the street.
Yeah.
I know this is not the way people probably thought this podcast was going to start, but I do think it puts things in perspective because I just remember thinking to myself, man, how am I going to get enough money to be able to get that doggone bike? And my dad's like, well, you know, you can mow this amount of yards. He's willing to start me a lawn business and all that. But I don't know. I think today's kids, they don't respect the idea of what they have. And I know that's us sounding older, right? But yeah, your Sprinter vans, the Work Connections catalogs, I think it's a perfect example of how much we appreciated cool stuff, what Definitely. We were willing to do to work for it, because we did have to work for everything. And I don't know, it was a sweet time. And I hope that we can, and I think a lot of our listeners are building young athletes the same way. It's like, you know, you're not doing slave labor, but you get them to understand, hey, those Dunlops don't grow on a tree in the back. You know, you might have to turn them the other direction and get a little bit more miles. It's okay. Nothing wrong with that.
Yeah. It's funny because my kid, she's got a Stasic and her rear tire is getting wore out. She rides that thing just nonstop, right?
Yeah.
She's like, Dad, I think I need a new rear tire. And I said, well, you got to pull some weeds or something. You know, we're not just going to get it. So trying to teach her that money doesn't grow on trees, for one. Yeah. And you got to work for the things that you want, you know?
Yep. Well, I remember you had all your allowances, trash, yard, walk the dog, clean up, all this stuff, right? And at the end of the week, there was $1 for each day that you did your work. So when you got to Friday, you get to Saturday, because Dad would only pay you for Monday through Friday. And, you know, so as you go out there and there's $2.21, literally, Dad put two $1 bills, 2 dimes and a penny. And you're like, where's my $5? He's like, where's the work?
Yeah.
You know, like, he didn't ask us to make our beds. It was expected.
Yeah.
Right. That was part of it. And he'd just start taking it off. But you didn't make your bed. You didn't didn't put fresh water down for the dog because that was your job. He's not going to ask you about it, but he's keeping a tally. At the end of the week, you got what you did. You got paid what you did. You got paid for the work that you did. I don't see anything wrong with that. It's the same thing with, like I've said this publicly, I think what Mitch Payton does is great. You know, most everybody gets the same salary. And like he always says, if you want to become wealthy, win.
Yeah.
You know, good win bonuses. But for the most part, everybody's working for, 45, 50 grand a year. You can make your money on top of that.
That's right. That's right.
I think all the vet riders can resonate with that, right? We all work our tail ends off to get what we have, and we still love riding, and we appreciate the bling and the works, the Works Connection stuff.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely.
Good stuff.
Well, today's show, Coach, is going to be, I want to talk about evaluating expectations from big races. We just had Mammoth, right? We just had Loretta's, and there's a lot of expectations that vet riders have for themselves. And we were talking briefly, before the show, and the expectations for a vet rider is different from an amateur, like a kid, right? Because we have different goals, right? Our factory days are gone. Pro Circuit's not going to call me tomorrow and ask me to ride for them. Those days have sailed, right?
Yep.
But we have families, we have jobs, we have different things in life that are a higher priority, but yet we still love to ride, right? And we try to make riding and training and racing a priority of ours in our lives. So we still have expectations, right? But sometimes we don't meet those expectations, and either it's mentally or physically, right? And I think for us as vet guys, and correct me if I'm wrong, Coach, because you have other vet guys that are on the program and stuff, but for me, the mental side of it really is what gets to me, because you have this expectation built up in your head. I'm going to go out, I'm going to whole shot, and I'm going to do this, I'm going to scrub this jump, and I'm going to jump that triple, and then sometimes the realization of it is, I don't have any business jumping that triple. Or, I shouldn't scrub anymore because it's, that's what screws me up. And those are the expectations, and then obviously results, right? And for me, it's I don't do a lot of racing anymore. I still do some, but not a lot. But I get really down on myself, Coach, when I come back from just a regular ride day and I just don't ride good, right? And I want to talk about some of those expectations and how to overcome those today.
You opened up with quite a bit in a good way. You mentioned getting down on yourself, kind of that emotional side, especially as men. We've got our big peacock feathers up. We don't want to admit that we ever get disappointed, or if I may use the word, a little bit down on ourselves, as you articulated. I'll even use the D word, a little bit depressed, right? We'll talk a little bit about it today, but I think a lot of guys need to understand that's a true chemical issue. And we'll talk a little bit about blood chemistry and high-level performance and stuff like that. But I want to come all the way back to what you opened up with. And if I take it out of order, please let me know. But I agree with you. It's that idea of results, right? At this point in our careers, whether we own our own businesses, we work for other people, we've been in our job for 10, 12 years, we're good at what we do. We live and die by numbers, meeting a quota, trying to make your ends meet, trying to put extra money in the bank, get a couple kids through college, get a daughter married, whatever it may be. These are all things that we have to try to balance. But if you think about it, it's all numbers. If there's a little bit more money in the bank than there was last year at this time, you go, yeah, cool. Especially if you're, Dan, you and I don't think we've been very bashful about this, right? We're not afraid to say that we're proud to be hunter-gatherers, providers. That's what gives us a purpose. Mm-hmm. And when you look at the idea that, especially for somebody who has put in the sweat equity, which I would say 90% of our listeners have done. Now, there's never one person that's ever going to say, you know what, I went into Mammoth, I went into Loretta's, and I was in the best shape I could have ever gotten to. Nobody. Said nobody, right? It's like, I don't care if you gave yourself 30 hours a week to get physically fit, you would still say, I think I could have been a little fitter. So as we've talked about before, when you look at those 4 pillars of success, preparation, fed, rested, and hydrated, a lot of our listeners are too damn busy, weren't able to come in all perfectly prepared. What about fitness-wise, strength, sprint speed, endurance, lactate tolerance? Yeah, probably we could have been a little bit fitter in one of those or all of those. What about our strategic approach? Maybe we got a little overzealous. We're racing with our buddy. We're like, oh, I'm hell-bent that guy's going to beat me. So we kind of deviate from our race plan. We know that we're capable, we call it threshold critical speed numbers. How fast can I go before I go into the red, and I can't stay in the red very long before I go backwards? That's just the inverse relationship between intensity and volume. Yeah, you went out a little bit too hard, smoked yourself. You literally blew your wad way too early. Well, at the end of the day, what does all this result in? Now, a little bit of disappointment. And it's so cool. Unlike what you said, it's not a lack of preparation. It's not a lack of what we put into it. We just made a tactical error on race day. That could be one of those. You and I have talked about this off the record. When someone has a bad race weekend, Is it because they weren't prepared? Could be. If somebody has a bad race weekend, is it a fitness issue? Could be. It could be a recovery issue in between motos. It could be not managing heat and humidity like at Loretta's. It could be one of or all of those combined, or a little bit of each day that accumulated and it accounts for a lot. I tend to look at it more on the positive side. Someone goes and has a great race weekend. Is it because you were prepared, fit, or had a good race strategy? Could be yes to all of them. It's never just one. And I think that's what's important to start today's conversation on, is the idea of, okay, the race is over. Let's, you and I talked about, we live and die by numbers. Let's jump into the wearable device information. Like, what was your average and max heart rate? What was your calorie burn rate? What's your food log look like? Were you able to bridge that? Sweat rate, things that we talked about on the preparing show, right?
Yeah.
Getting ready for what's coming up at Mammoth. And so now here we are. It's after the fact, but I liked what you said. Number one, we didn't meet our own expectations. And number two, you said it yourself, you get a little bit down on yourself. And I think that can be a little bit dangerous if it's not kept in the right perspective.
Yeah, it can be. I'll give you a classic example. This is a real life case study of myself.
Okay.
I rode Hangtown a couple weeks ago, the national track, and that has it pretty much prepped like it was for the national. And the jumps are big. There's no doubt about it. The jumps are big, and the Hangtown is a gnarly track anyways. And it'd been a while since I'd ridden there. And coach, I was scared to death to do the jumps, right? By the end of the day, I was doing them, but I was scared to death, very uncomfortable. I didn't have a great day, didn't have a lot of fun because it wasn't something I was just, I wasn't comfortable right away.
Sure.
And so I just was just kind of discouraged. And I get in my head sometimes where if I haven't been to a certain track, or if the track is new, I'm very careful. And it's just, I think it's part of age, right? Getting older and having other responsibilities and stuff. I'm just a little bit more careful than I used to be. Instead of just letting my riding instincts take over, because if I let my riding instincts take over, like, I'm good, like, no problem. And by the end of the day, I did, and I was able to manage, but for the majority of the day, I didn't have a good day.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that kind of bled over into this weekend. I rode Riverfront, and Riverfront's like my home, right? That's my home track. I ride there just about every week. Track wasn't changed, coach, but I was scared to death to do the jumps. Like, I'm thinking, I'm reminiscing of Phil Nicoletti, just do the jumps, but I didn't want to do the jumps. Like, literally, it was like rolling over some of them. These jumps, coach, that I've jumped 1,000 times, Yep. And I went back to the truck. I told Zeb, I said, dude, something's wrong. Like, I'm in my head. Like, I can't, I don't want to do the jumps. And he's like, what? And I'm like, yeah, it's the weirdest thing. And, he told me, just, dude, you got to just let your instincts take over. You've done these a gazillion times. What's wrong with you? Sure. But it was just weird. Like, I was so in my head. I was so discouraged from the weekend before. It bled over. And I didn't get over it. Right. And, it was really strange. I don't exactly know why that happened. It's never happened ever before, but I don't know if it's just an age thing, or usually, what it felt like, coach? It felt like after you have a big one, right?
Mm-hmm.
You're just a little scared and timid.
Sure.
Exactly how I felt, but I haven't crashed in, knock on wood, months.
Yeah.
But it was an expectation that I had for myself that I didn't meet, even on just a ride day.
Yeah. There's again, not to be repetitive here, but there's a lot to unpack there. First thing that I always look at as a physiologist is I'd love to look at your food the night before and then the morning of. Is that a low blood sugar issue? We've talked a lot about the idea that the lower that your blood sugar gets, the slower your reaction time is. So you have two gas tanks in the body. The liver feeds the brain, its ability literally to perceive depth. Think about it. You come in fourth gear tapped, that transition from when you're on the gas to the brake, it's literally a millisecond. Well, if you have low blood sugar levels, that depth perception is going to be negatively impacted. Everything's going to be slower. So you're going to be a little bit late to transition, and you end up making a 3-point turn instead of flowing and having good roll speed. Another thing to take into consideration, and I would encourage all the listeners to do this on a regular basis, look at your 7-day stress coming into your day of riding. Compare that 7-day average. And by the way, Garmin gives you all this information. If you go to your 7-day stress score, look at the bottom, it'll tell you what the average is. Now toggle at the top of it from 7 days to 4 weeks. Are you under a lot more stress right now than you normally are? Now, even that word normal can be a little bit of a double-edged sword. I would love my athletes to have their stress below a 25. I've had people that, based on us doing this show together, have emailed us and said, hey, look, my average stress score is in the 70s, average stress score in the 70s. So if you take and you put that into the realm of a young child, if you have a young child that's being run ragged, he's at football practice 4 days a week, he's in advanced classes, he's not sleeping very much, he's always on edge. And then you start getting the cascading of, all right, now there's room for doubt because there's no mental resiliency. There's room for doubt because there's low blood sugar levels. Then you have a couple little, like let's say you hit a little bit of a kicker and you can get that little butt pucker. Normally you can just blow that off and go, okay, I need to hit that 1 gear taller. So, and maybe preload it so you don't hit the kicker. Well, that's a depth perception issue again. But unfortunately, when we're stressed and we have low blood sugar and we clip that with our rear wheel, we get a little bit of that panic rev going. It just pisses us off to high heaven and it gets replaced with anger. The anger gets replaced with fear. Now we're getting into some really deep neuroscience and sports psychology, but that's literally the cascading of what normally happens. Tired, low blood sugar, high levels of stress, i.e. fatigue in the body, the slightest little technical mistake, instead of it would blow it off, oh no, it makes our blood boil. We're like a teapot that just blew its top. Then you hit the next jump. Then you hit a little bit awkward or you hit a little bit off balance. Now you're like, did I forget to ride? Like you said, when you're talking to Zeb, you're going back like, dude. And he's like not repeating what you said. He was really surprised that you're like, I can't jump those jumps. Yep. For Zeb, he's seen you do it, as you said, 1,000 times. What do you mean you can't jump that? So that's where I want people to understand, when we reverse engineer the source of fear, it's usually a cascading of things. I'm not going to say that food and sleep and water cures it, but I'm going to say sleep, food, and water cures it. Because no matter how far back you roll back the dominoes, it's always going to originate. That's going to be the problem. Now, there's some people that would say, but what about skill set? Of course, that's where athletic maturity comes in. Every time we swing a leg over a bike, we build athletic maturity. So you know how to read that lip. You know how to maybe go to a quarter inch. You know how to preload it and just skip the whole thing. You know to click it up 1 gear to give it a little bit of a plusher hit, whatever it may be. So the biggest thing is going back to the blood chemistry, and it goes back, like you said at the beginning of today's show, when you're looking at the idea of why would I be a little bit depressed? Why would I be a little bit in the doldrums after a high profile race? You've got to really, and I mentioned it at the onset of our conversation, it really boils down to blood chemistry. If you remember back to 8th grade biology, remember when you would look at a cell and they referred to the organelles inside a cell? Cytochrome C, creatine, all of these micronutrients and organelles that are inside the blood, those are all depleted. This is why a taper before the race is so incredibly important, because you top off the blood chemistry. And then maintaining hydration and food during the week, literally, and I know this wouldn't have made sense if we talked about it prior to both Mammoth as well as Loretta's, but we do have World Vets coming up in November, right? So when you look at the idea of, we want to have you come into the race with your blood chemistry topped off, it really is so that your depth perception and your resilience to heat, humidity, and the stress of racing, you are more resilient. That's why I always say, please do everything you can to go into a race as tapered as you can possibly be. Taper is just a very sophisticated way of saying, make sure the body is void of fatigue, shed fatigue. So if you bring the volume down, now you bring the quality of the blood chemistry up, because you're creating less and less depletion in the body. Yep. Is that super sophisticated, or does that make sense?
No, it makes total sense, especially I think that the older that we get, right, our blood chemistry, I think, changes more drastically. And, you know,
we're more sensitive to it is what it is.
Right. My question on that front is, I do know a few gentlemen that are training for World Vets in November, and if they wanted to dial in their blood chemistry, right, when should they start getting tested? Because I would assume that you don't want to get your first test November 1st, because you may need to adjust, right? You may need to do different things and you may need to dial that in. It's not a perfect exact science for each individual person. So when do you recommend somebody starting that, getting those blood tests to try to be dialed in for world vets?
That's not going to come across the answer I'm going to give you is not going to be very popular because you need at least a year. And I want to be very clear as to why that number is put out there. If we use a calendar of January through December, 12 months in a year, you get me blood work drawn in January and it comes back and it says that you're out of range in 3 micronutrients. We know what foods are filled with those micronutrients: B6, B12, iron, zinc. I use those 4 all the time because zinc is going to have an influence on your thyroid, your B vitamins or your energy vitamins. Iron is where you carry oxygen in the blood through hemoglobin. It's a precursor. It helps when you say a female is anemic, really what they're saying is they have low iron levels, they have low red blood cell count in their body. So if you look at those 4, right, you get your blood work done. You get your blood work done in January and you're low in those 4 ranges, or you're low in those 4 micronutrients. We encourage you, we put some meals in front of you that increases the volume of where you get B6, B12, iron, and zinc. Then you get your blood work done in March. You say, or April, first week in April. If there's not been an improvement, then we need to add supplementation. So stick with me here. I promise you it'll be very crystal clear. You have a baseline in January. You get the numbers back. You realize that there's a deficiency. So you eat more of that. You hope that you're going to be able to eat and absorb enough that you'll be in the proper ranges. You get it back in April, you're still out of range. That's when supplementation comes in. So now you're eating more and you're supplementing. Now we get to the end of June, right? 6 months has transpired. Get your blood work done again. If you're still not in the appropriate ranges, you need to look at getting your gut health checked because you're eating more, but it could be that you're not absorbing it. Well, now we're into 9 months into the year because that's where my job comes in. Baseline, eat more food, supplement, test absorption. If we still, because remember, everybody who's listening to this show, you've got families and jobs and you wear a lot of hats and a lot of responsibilities. The body is just getting depleted by stress. Your body really can't differentiate work stress from relationship stress, from riding stress. Stress in the body is stress. It doesn't care where it comes from. It's just an external sensation that the body has to adapt to. Stress is just a category. Now think about this. You get to the end of the year, 12 months later, you've eaten more food, you added supplements, you even got your gut checked, and you are absorbing, then that simply means that you're burning it faster than you can get it in. So my responsibility is I have to cut back on the volume and the intensity of your training. That doesn't make me popular. But as I've said publicly before, I will never put your health behind performance. Health has always got to be in front of it. Because what good is it for you to be super fast, but you know you're smoking your adrenals? What good is it for you to be super fast and your bike's worth more than your truck? What good is it for you to be super fast and you have no relationships? What good is it if you're, really super fit, but you can't hold a job because you never get to work? And that's where blood work is a very, very fascinating. And that's why we started Complete Med Solutions, because when you have somebody that's like, all right, I get it, Rob, I'm going to get tested every 3 weeks or every 3 months. And we're going to just follow that pattern. Baseline, eat more food, evaluate it. If not, add supplements. If not, get the absorption done. By the way, you can do absorption even earlier, but some people aren't really keen on giving fecal matter and those types of tests. Then at the end of that year, you go, okay, hopefully you figured out what is it going to take. And this is another thing I want to make sure that the listeners are really aware of. When you get your blood work drawn and you get a panel, in a generic sense, you're not getting a panel of health, you're getting the absence of disease. Now, I'm not going to get into a political soapbox. The FDA is a crock of crap and all the political BS that's behind that. But the reality of it is when you get those ranges, that's not giving you, are you optimizing as an athlete? Is it truly optimizing you as an individual? No, it's not. It's just telling you that you don't have a disease. Now, isn't it interesting that when you go in there, and you have all these chronic deficiencies, they wait until you get diseased, and then they're like, oh, well, we have a medicine for the disease. Well, wait a second, we could have avoided fill in the blank, right? Adrenal fatigue, Addison's, all these things that we talk about that are fatigue related are avoidable. All we had to do was make sure that we were getting enough food to meet the caloric demands, make sure that we were managing personal and professional financial stress. That's where your stress score, I think, is so invaluable. And then we get to look at blood work. So that's why I said at the beginning of your question, most people don't have a year. That's why we put these shows out. If I can get in front of somebody early enough where they don't run out of time, now we've alleviated frustrations. So life is good, you know? But the hard part is, and this is what we do as an analytics company, is remember, if you've got 3 attributes, that's 3 to the 3rd power, that's 27 different combinations. So a listener may see this and go, I'm tired. What's contributing to tired? Dehydrated, not eating enough calories, not sleeping enough. Usually we start with those big 3. Oh, no, I'm getting 9 hours of sleep. I'm bridging my calorie gap. I'm perfectly hydrated every day. Well, then where else can the stress be coming? Oh, you've got a rogue boss. You know, all of a sudden now you realize that person's taking more out of you. Maybe somebody's not treating you very respectfully, not wah, right? But you're getting taken advantage by somebody and you're looking at it going, really? They think that that's cool. So now you've got the mental angst that you've got to either address it immediately, which sometimes we don't have time for. You might have a young one that's at home, it's sick. Your wife may have found out she's just newly pregnant. She's not feeling the best. And then you're like, I don't have the headspace to deal with these people that are taking advantage of me. Well, without you realizing, your blood cortisol levels are going up because it's stress.
Right.
You think you can handle it, especially for the big burly dudes that are listening to this, right? We have a big ass backpack. We're like, throw the rocks in. I'll carry this. I'll carry the world on my back until you can. And I say that very respectfully because I don't think any of us want to ever admit that we're at a point where we can't take on anymore. But blood work will show you've hit a point of diminishing returns, unfortunately.
So somebody that's wanting to be fully dialed in by November, that's unrealistic, right? But it's absolutely a benefit for them to start their blood testing now, right? Because they're getting, regardless, right? They may not be at the optimum levels.
Yep.
They're going to be better off than where they would be if they didn't do it, correct?
You're 100% correct. Now, I'm going to make a comment that's not going to make me very popular, but I feel like we as a show have a responsibility to the listeners. It's easier to do nothing. And plain and simple, right? So it's kind of like we say in the entrepreneurial world. I try to encourage people to start their own businesses. And I do consulting with as many entrepreneurs as I can for this reason. I can show you what it takes to build a successful business. I've built 11 of them, and I don't say that arrogantly. My point is this. I can show them the Cliff Note version to success, but half of them will still choose not to do it. Yeah. So I always say it's easier to not do anything, but it doesn't change the end result. It doesn't change the outcome. So it's like when someone's not feeling good, do we wait until we're just tired of not feeling good? And then we go, all right, now I've got it to the point where I'm tired of being tired. I'm tired of being injured. I'm tired of fill in the blank, right? Let's use a real sensitive subject that everybody can relate to. You can choose to recognize that you don't have a high arousal rate. You can see that your libido is down in the ground. You recognize it, but you just dismiss it until finally it becomes an issue in your relationship. We've seen all the big red light in the room's been blinking, but we're just too busy, or maybe our ego won't let us. That's why I say to my entrepreneurs and I say to all my athletes, it's going to be difficult, but it's going to be worth it. Unfortunately, it's easier to do nothing. You've got the knowledge and you know what to do, but it's just easier to do nothing because you declare it's just too difficult. So like I say to my entrepreneurs, 100% in just give up now. Just quit. And I say that totally sarcastic because the idea is when you tell me it's too hard to try, you might as well just not even start. It's going to be difficult, right? So it's the same thing with blood work. Why wait until you get diseased? Why wait until you have issues in the bedroom? Now you've dented your ego, you've dented your pride, you've dented your pleasure zones, right? Again, let's all be big men and women here, and we're talking about sexual intimacy, talking about sex, right? You wait till it becomes a problem. You wait till it becomes a frustration that's so high. Then we respond to do something. It's like adrenal fatigue. Resting heart rate's elevated, appetite is suppressed, craving simple sugars. We make excuses for it. Backpack, just get me a bigger backpack. I'll carry bigger rocks, instead of realizing, hey, dude, your cup is runneth over, right? Remember we talked about, if you look at it like a teeter-totter, if one side of that is stress and the other one is recovery can only come from food, water, and sleep. No exceptions.
Yeah.
The problem is the stress bucket is 10 times bigger than the recovery bucket. Well, we're big bravado. We're going to suck it up. We'll just get a bigger bag and we'll run harder. We'll run longer until our back breaks, till our knees crumble. And then we're forced to have to look at it.
Yeah. There is some riders too and racers that, and I'm going to talk about like a James Jetmar, like that. He is fit. He follows the program. He eats well. He's, for a vet guy, I mean, he's dialed in, right?
Yep.
But
it's so funny you bring him up. Go ahead.
But James could still go to a race and do poor, right? He could still not meet his expectations, right? It's not for a lack of fitness, preparation, food, sleep, any of that, right? It's just he went and he did poorly, but he was prepared. How do you overcome that? Like, what's the best way to overcome that, and evaluating your performance, knowing that you checked all the boxes?
Ooh, this is a good question. And it's funny you bring up James, because obviously our conversation, well, at least I hope our listeners know that we don't rehearse these conversations. This is truly an organic conversation. Just before I came on the show today, James sent me some text pictures, and he has a practice track. He has a turn track at his house, which is about 45 seconds long. And he had some pro guys come over, and the ruts got 2.5, 3 feet deep. And he was just talking about how he literally could ride for 25, 30 minutes. And guys half his age could only ride for about 10 minutes. And they verbally said to him, how the hell are you doing this? How can you keep going? Now, I don't get any credit for it. James is the one that's put in the sweat equity. I do appreciate the blind faith, trusting the process and the system, but we have 298 amateur national titles before Loretta's this year. We're hoping to go over 300 after this week. But the bottom line is this. When you're looking at building durability and you check all your boxes, we do testing every 6 weeks. We're training with accurate heart rate zones. How do you deal with a race that is subpar based on what you know you're capable of? Is you have to reverse engineer it and take it apart. So I'll share with all the listeners something that I do with my clients, and I would encourage you guys to do it as well. When the race is over, take a piece of paper and write down every single attribute that you feel is a positive. Now, this is where people are like, well, is he going to come back and put it in categories? No, we're not. When I say to you, Dan, you went out and you rode at Hangtown with Zeb, give me everything that comes to your mind that, in your opinion, was positive. Air temperature was perfect. Dirt quality was great. New set of gloves. I made a sub sandwich that I haven't had in a while. I downloaded some new music. There is no category that's off limits. When I say to you, what elements in your brain, that's what we call like literally downloading your computer chip, what in your brain is perceived as a positive element of that race weekend? Could have been your Uncle Eddie showed up and you haven't seen him in forever. Like I said, could be gear, it could be bike setup, it could be dirt conditions, it could be music, sounds, smells, whatever. I don't know. Doesn't matter. Get them written down. On a separate piece of paper, write down everything that went sideways. And I always encourage people to have a spiral notebook with you and just travel with it, because you'll be driving down the road and you'll be kind of letting the race reminisce again. I'd prefer you to do this as soon as you get done racing, like before you leave the property, or when you're driving, have somebody with you with a notepad. Just start dumping your thoughts down. Don't organize them. Track turned to shit. Tires didn't work well. The bike was too stiff. My stomach was upset. I got overwhelmed with the heat. I'm just coming up with some very random things. The idea here is, again, no categories. Just literally get them down. Give yourself a week, and at the end of that week, take the sheet of paper of everything that didn't go right, that didn't go well, things that you didn't like. Subdivide that into things you can control and things you can't control. So it's very simple. I'm just trying to make sure that people really understand what we're doing. Sheet of paper number 1, all positive attributes. Sheet number 2, everything that went bad. And then a week later, break down everything that went bad into what you can control and what you can't control. And I'll give you a very specific example. We had an athlete that was an off-road racer, and he went to a race venue that literally Has never rained at this venue because the race is about the same time every year. It was an off-road race. Has never rained in the history of this series. Guess what? Today it opened up. He did not have a set of goggles set to roll-offs, so he tried to race with tear-offs. Water went in between. Opening lap, he misjudged going into the woods, caught his shoulder, and literally ripped his entire shoulder out of the socket completely. Went in, had shoulder surgery done. It got infected. It got septic. He almost lost his entire arm. Now, the reason why I say that is, as weird as that is and as devastating as it is, it was something that didn't go well, but something that was easily corrected. Never go to a race without a set of goggles already set to roll-offs and tear-offs, just in case that 1 in a million chance, because the roll-offs would have reduced the risk of us missing that depth perception, hanging his shoulder up, and unfortunately ended up ending his racing career. That's how bad the injury was.
Wow.
Because of not having roll-offs, right? So when you go and you look at, and this is what the last comment I'll make on this question and the statement is, when you get a list of everything that went well, just keep carrying it forward. You've already got a list of what went well. Keep doing it. The things that didn't go well that you can control, simply fix it. Have 2 sets of goggles, one with roll-offs and one with tear-offs. Be ready for everything. The things that you can't control are the things you need to train. And it usually will boil down to, I'm not good in wet conditions, then ride in the mud more. I'm not good in dry blue groove. I don't have good throttle control. You just outlined what you need to focus on. This is where we get into the real nitty gritty of, unfortunately, most people just continue to reinforce what they're already good at, not realizing that you're getting beat by what you refuse to address. So hold on to your seat. It's not a cliche. Think about this realistically. Your goal is to convert every weakness, mental and physical, into a strength. Take your strengths and expose everyone else's weaknesses. Now, if you can get past it, sounds like a textbook cliche, divide, conquer. That's how we've got nearly 300 national championships and 4 AMA #1 plates. It's not about me being smart. It's about divide, conquer, have thick enough skin to go, you know what? That was a really silly mistake. Who cares? Did we fix it? Because that's where I get pissed off. I'll use that word pissed off, right? To me, it's like, all right, I can show you that was a mistake, and yet you still continue to make that same mistake, i.e. you don't drink or eat enough on a regular basis. You're looking at your stress score, it's going up. You're looking at HRV, it's going down. Resting heart rate's going up. Sleep score is going down. Sleep ratios are going down. And you're going to argue with me that you need to cut calories. Oh, well, so-and-so told me that. I don't care what so-and-so said. You can't try to dupe physiology and nutrition. That's the example I've used on the show before.
Yeah.
If I'm going to try to save weight on a bike, it's not by cutting the oil in the casings and run the radiators dry to save liquid weight, right?
Yep.
You could realize there's a ramification in mechanical terms. Well, I don't care what any so-called, especially nowadays, we'll call them social media gurus and experts are, right? You can't dupe nutrition and physiology. If you run a calorie gap, you're going to go backwards. It isn't how you cut weight. It's not how you drop body fat. Now, anybody that wants to sit and have an adult conversation, I'll explain the physiology. I'll show you a multitude of clinical tests. That's not the way they do it at the Olympic Training Center. And as I've said to you off the air, Dan, I always run my filters through. If they won't do it at the Olympic Training Center, then you shouldn't be doing it on your own.
Yeah.
If we, as a professional triathlete, and you're at the Olympic training, or I guess that's an oxymoron. Well, not anymore. There used to be a time when you were either pro or an amateur, but when I was trying to get onto the triathlon team for the sport of, at the Olympic level, if I came in and did a key up, they would ostracize me. You know, those pull-ups they do where they get kind of because what they would say is, do you not realize that you're destroying your shoulders by going through a range of motion that are anatomically contrary? And you're like, okay, well, that makes sense, right? And so when you look, and this is, I don't want any comments below talking about pro or con CrossFit. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about functional range of motion. I'm talking about huge caloric gaps. If you put it in mechanical terms, it seems so absolute. If you put it in physiological terms, it's the same way, but now you have to factor how the body responds to it, which goes back, like you're saying, everybody responds a little bit differently but you still can't run calorically restricted, dehydrated, sleep deprived, and think that you're going to be healthy. And if we're trying to reduce the risk of injuries, how are bones, muscles, tendons, and ligaments supposed to get thicker and more durable when you're not feeding them and not giving them enough rest?
Yeah.
I mean, that's the end of the conversation as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah.
So that's where I would recommend when someone has a bad race weekend, and this is where it comes full circle to Dan. Once you have a list of everything that went well, you just carry it forward. The things that didn't go well that you can control, you fix. The things that you can't control is what you train. Well, now your confidence goes up, and hopefully the next race, what you learned and you've seen where you've addressed your weaknesses, well, that becomes the blueprint on how we win the next race. Because if it was a strategic area, somebody went out and tried to beat somebody that so-called shouldn't have beat them, what you've done is you've allowed yourself to fall into trying to match their strategy, which doesn't fit your physical capabilities. That's on you. You have to own that. Does that make sense?
It does. And it's such a simple thing. And I know that there's going to be listeners that will be like, oh, he wants me to write stuff down on a piece of paper. That doesn't work. That's too easy. But it truly, it might sound stupid, right? Coach, there's going to be guys that say, oh my God, I can't believe that's how he's going to solve it, is to get a pen and a paper out and start writing things down. But truly, that's the best way to identify what your challenge is. And I'll just be, again, I'm fully transparent. I told you I rode like shit for 2 weekends in a row. I'm scared to death, but I don't like the mud. When the days that and it wasn't muddy the last 2 ride days, but the days that I don't have a lot of fun and ride like shit, it's because usually it's muddy. I know that. I know that. And I know that's one of the things that I need to work on is go ride in the mud. But Coach, I'm transparent. I don't like the mud. I don't like to clean the mud off my bike. So, but that's me. But at least I know, right? I can control that. I can control getting better in the mud. I'm just not willing to do it.
Well,
but at least I know.
But you hit the nail on the head. You've identified what it is, but you're not willing to make the commitment to turn that frustration into a strength, which is okay. So this is what I always say. I say to every size bike that we work on, instead of selling your bike at the end of the year, hold on to it and make it a designated mud bike. It's going to chew up chains and sprockets. It's, how many times have we seen when the guys go racing, they'll bring their practice bike on the mud day because they're not going to take their, full prep race bike because they know it's just a crapshoot.
Yeah.
So that's my whole thing. I totally understand. And I don't think anybody listening would disagree with you. Cleaning the mud off of a bike, the way it just disintegrates the bikes. None of us are disputing that whatsoever until you go ride and then you have a miserable day because you're not good in the mud. And for someone like yourself that, like you say, you're not getting paid to race anymore. Okay. But so here's your options: not ride at all, which is always an option, or get to a point where you're good enough that you can enjoy riding in the mud and you're willing to deal with the cleaning and the disintegration of the bike at some level because the cost benefit is there for you. And that's really goes back to what you said earlier. Why are you not going full send mode? Opportunity cost is just too high. When we were 19 years old, the opportunity cost was we were in a cast, right? Opportunity cost at my age, 56, is, what about income? What about meet and greets? What about the obligations that I have to my employees, to my riders, to my wife, to my children? Opportunity cost gets up quite high.
Yeah.
Some people don't have a problem with that. Even at our age, right? There's guys that are like, I'm not judging it. Everybody's in their own place, but it goes back to, you've got to be able to look yourself in the mirror and go, why was it a good weekend? Why was it a bad weekend? Is it the same? And if, by the way, we refer to these as data dumps. If you use a calendar again as an illustration, if January is race number 1, your data dump becomes your blueprint on what you're going to do in February, even if it's the same track, even if it's a different track. Because what you're going to notice is you get 6-7 months of data dumps, you're going to start to see a consistency. You're going to see a consistency on the things that are good. They tend to duplicate themselves. Ironically, the things that are holding you back from succeeding, they will stay there until you address them head on.
Yeah.
So eventually what our goal is by the time you get to race number 12 at the end of the year, that's the ultimate blueprint for the upcoming season. You already know what works. You don't think that Tomac and Webb and Sexton and those guys, you don't think that they're looking at what's holding them back from beating Jet. You bet they are.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's very, very minimal. We could pick on Chase all day long, right? Chase was as fast as Jet until he tucked the front end. Thanks, James Stewart, right? But the idea is, I always go back to when Tomac moved up to the 450 class. And that 1 year he was fastest qualifier. He got the Oakley Bomb fastest qualifier, led the most laps, had the most wins, but didn't win the 450 plate. That was a year his belt broke in his pants.
Yep.
And all these little silly mistakes, right? So it goes to show you he was the fastest. He had won the most, but unfortunately, those few little mistakes were enough that kept him from getting a number one plate, not once, not twice, but three times in a row.
Yep.
So that's where I always say to my clients, I don't want you to take, and we'll say it and share it with our listeners, I don't want the concept to just be a concept. You're watching it with Tomac 3 years ago, 5 years ago. You're looking at Jet last year, right? You look at Hayden Deeg and Brian talking on Gypsy Tales with Jace, saying, hey, look, we did our homework. We knew that this is what we needed to get past. We prepared for it. We actually came in a little more prepared than they were capable of. That's a great epiphany, and it's not a surprise that Deegan's doing so well because they studied what they needed to do to come in and be the best. So to your point, some people will say, look, I don't have time for it. Well, like I always say, half the people will do it and they'll have tremendous results, and half of them will just say it's too difficult. And that's why I always say it's just as easy to do nothing than it is to not be happy.
It is.
That's where it comes down to choices. And that's why I love this show is, we've got people that went and raced Mammoth. We have people that went and raced Loretta's. And like you say, it's racing. Anything can happen. But if you did everything that you were capable of and you're willing to really sit down and look yourself in the mirror, you've essentially just catapulted your ability to come back from Loretta's and go win Mammoth, go win World Vets. Because if you got better from Mammoth to Loretta's and you get better from Loretta's to World Vets, well, where will you be, fill in the blank? Daytona next year.
Yeah.
Wherever you go next, back to Mammoth next year, back to World Vets. And you just keep repeating that. That's why we always say success isn't accidental, but it's not guaranteed either. Now, again, some people will look at that and roll their eyes and say, it's a nice textbook cliche, but think about it verbatim. It's not guaranteed, but it's not accidental. Whether that's Jet, whether that's Deegan, whether that's Tomac, Sexton, anybody that you've looked at. So that's where I always love being able to do these shows, because our goal is to get these concepts in front of the listeners. And then if they can implement it, then they can leverage the knowledge instead of always doing it in a knee-jerk reaction. That's what we're trying to avoid.
Before we wrap up, Coach, I want to just hit on one more thing. You said it a little bit earlier in the pod. Getting yourself a fitness watch, right? If you don't have a fitness watch, a Garmin, that's the platform that you prefer. You're very familiar with that platform, and you can give our listeners a lot of help with that platform. But as that aged rider, right? It's the UPS is dropping off bike parts. We like numbers, right? We're used to numbers. We're used to looking at quotas. We want to see our paychecks grow, right? We just like numbers. But I geek out with looking at data from my watch or Lit Pro, right? Looking at lap times and things like that. I want to read it to the listeners. If you don't have a fitness watch, go out and get yourself one of the Garmin platforms, because you can help the listeners with that. But you'll find it a lot of fun, for one. You get some really good data. And Coach, I synced my watch with the Lit Pro app, and where, I could look at it and I could see some sections that I just suck in, right? And I could look at my line choices in the Lit Pro, and it's really fun. And I've been able to get better in those sections by looking at that data, on the bike. Yeah. And I don't know if you want to touch on that a little bit further, but having the watch to be able to get the data is key.
It all boils down to numbers. And what I love about it is, if somebody owns their own business and they said to me that we're going to double our revenue next year, and I go, cool, how are you going to do it? And they're like, well, in service, we're going to do this, and in parts, we're going to do this. All right, perfect. And then you're like, all right, if it's $1 million that we want out of that parts department, we know that this is the average margin, so we need to move X amount of units, and we get busy on how we're going to move that amount of units to get that end result. And that, to me, is what human performance is all about. When you add something like the Lit Pro, you've just hit a grand slam. Because I'll say this publicly, I've been called by different agents and different OEMs that will say, is there a way that you can show us how the human body responds to an adjustment that we make on the bike? Absolutely, all day long. But here's the cool part. It isn't just for the OEMs and the factory riders. It's for everyone listening. You put a Lip Pro on, and that Lip Pro says, all right, inside is lane 1, middle is lane 2, outside's lane 3. So Lip Pro shows you that coming into that straightaway James Stewart style lane 3, crisscross the braking bumps, come into lane not lane 1, but rather lane 2. Okay, great. Lip Pro gives you all the numbers. You go out and you do it, and you look at your heart rate monitor, and you see that the heart rate is just blowing through the sky. Now it gives you motivation to go back to the gym. That's why we focus on left and right side of the body, because you have a left and a right peg. I want to make sure, because you have to think about, when you go to transition from standing to sitting, you're essentially doing a one-legged, isolated squat. Think about this. When you lift your left foot up to go into a left-hand turn, as subtle as it may be, that time that your both feet are on the pegs versus when one foot comes off the peg, you're now doing a one-footed squat as you lower your bum and get your left leg out in front of you. So going to the gym and doing something that has both legs working simultaneously is counterproductive for a motorcycle rider. So now we come back. Lip Pro is showing you the fastest line. It's my responsibility as a physiologist to make sure that your strength exercises emulates what Lip Pro shows the fastest, but you can do it not once, not twice, but 100 times without your heart rate blowing up. And that's going to be a combination of strength and cardiovascular. They're never working completely independent of one another. They always work integrating. You can be super strong and run out of oxygen. You could be an aerobic monster and have no muscular strength. That's why in our membership area, and I want to make sure, Dan, that we get this out to everybody, we've recently added new express workouts in our membership area. Now, it's not a sales pitch on CRS membership. You guys asked for something, we're going to create it. I mean, that's the bottom line. And so when you go into that membership area, I understand most everybody said I've got about 30 to 40 minutes. So guess what? All the strength and cardio in there in the express is all 30 to 40 minutes. It's got weekend rides on, Saturday, Sunday, which assuming you've got a couple hours to do. But even if not, you can abbreviate those as well. Put those together. Lip Pro, what's the fastest way around the track? CRS membership, what's the strength and the flexibility that I need to do with Lip Pro? For those of you who are fortunate enough to have a riding coach, the Ryan Sipes of the world, the Ben Riddles of the world, right? Hey, when that riding coach asks you to please stand up through those deep braking bumps, you're like, yes, sir, happy to do it for as long as you ask, sir. You're going to be looking far enough ahead because you've got strength and flexibility in your shoulders. Toes are inward. You're just letting the bike float underneath you jet style. And when you do transition, as Ryan or Ben tell you to do, no worries. You've got the strength to sit, stand, sit, stand. I think we've mentioned it even on the show together, Dan. How many times does somebody lift their bum off the seat in one lap in any given track? It'd be fun to watch that, right? If you get somebody to count it, how many times do you lift your bum off that seat? Well, those are all individual leg squats, especially when you have that kind where you're weighting that outside peg and you're really lifting your bum off the seat to try to get more of a downward press, right? That inside leg is pressing up against the shroud. So now the bike is super stiff. Bike has input, it'll rail.
Yeah.
Well, when's the last time somebody's focused on that muscle known as the adductor from your pubic bone to the inside of your knee? But that's the leg muscle that's got to hold the inside leg against the shroud while the outside leg pushes down. This is something that we talk about in our performance camps all the time. But there's a disjoint between the way people train off the bike and the way they train on the bike. And here we are as busy, I call myself elderly nowadays, right? But I don't have time to squander. It's like time is money, money is time.
Yeah.
Get in there, do it right. Again, it's got to be geared towards what Lip Pro is telling us. That's the home run right there. And you get a good riding coach like Ben Riddle or Ryan Sipes, nobody's going to be able to touch you. We're very fortunate to work with Steve Hatch, and we've got a program that we're going to be launching here at the beginning of the year together. And I talk to Steve about this all the time because if you know Steve's, if you guys remember, again, we're going to go back to the vets, right? Remember when he kicked major ass in the motocross world, and he moved over to the off-road with Factory Suzuki and stuff and killed it for years. Yeah. I talk about that all the time is how people will, as we've said on the show, step over $1 to pick up a penny. Steve and I talk about that all the time, because for me, I'm not going to argue whether you should stand up or sit down in a rut. Steve will be able to tell you why you should or shouldn't. My responsibility is no matter what Steve asks you to do, you can do it.
Yeah,
and then,
exactly.
And then again and again and again. So it's a lot of fun.
Well, it's good. This one's been good, Coach. We've kind of went down memory lane for a little while. We talked about evaluating our performance, these races, some ride days. This one's been good. Just wanted to thank all the listeners. Thank you guys all on YouTube, all the other platforms. Make sure you guys like and subscribe. Make sure you guys see CompleteRacingSolutions.com. Those express workouts are really nice that Coach has put together, especially for us vet riders because we don't have a lot of time in our lives to work out. CoachRobbStore.com. Make sure you guys get your energy fuel, your supplements there. Coach, anything to add?
No, I appreciate it. I do have to concur with you. I just want to say thanks for the numbers. The growth numbers are surpassing way more than we thought. And it puts a smile on my face because I hope people see we just want to be able to give everybody the shortcut to where we all can enjoy riding our bikes and getting our kids and soon to be grandkids excited about it. So thank you so much for another show, Dan. And again, thanks for all those that have taken the time to listen. We deeply appreciate it. We'll see you next month.
See you guys.
Peace.